listening to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and more. Here's your host, KickedTripod.
Good morning, Overwatch League fans, and welcome to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and opinions. I'm John KickedTripod Horseman, and here's your Overwatch League Daily episode for December 6th, 2017. On today's show, Overwatch League announced League Tokens, a new in-game currency to purchase Overwatch League skins to directly support teams and the league. Overwatch League Commissioner Nate Nanzer participated in a Reddit AMA yesterday. We'll tell you what we learned. The Philadelphia Fusion are going to be missing the preseason due to visa issues, and I'm joined by Mitch Leslie and Josh Sideshow Wilkinson to discuss preseason week. After a popular request on the competitive Overwatch subreddit, Overwatch League Commissioner Nate Nanzer participated in an AMA yesterday morning, and here's the highlights of what we learned. Overwatch League branded gear will be available at 10 a.m. Pacific time today. The Overwatch League mobile app will release on January 9th. Substitutions have long been a question mark for Overwatch League fans. The rule for substitutions is that the team must notify the league-appointed team rep no later than the end of the first round of a given map for the substitution to take effect for the next map. The inaugural season will feature a transfer window where trades and new signings can occur, and is the only time in which these changes can occur following roster lock, which took place on October 30th, 2017. The transfer window will open the day following the last day of Stage 1, which is February 11th, 2018, and closed before the first day of Stage 3 on April 3rd, 2018. Nanzer did reveal other details about Overwatch League, and you can find a link to the full AMA thread in the show notes. The Overwatch League preseason is upon us. Over a year has gone by since we were first introduced to the idea of Overwatch League, and tonight we finally get to see the culmination of all the hard work and anticipation. Today's matches will begin at 4 p.m. Pacific and will include the Florida Mayhem versus the San Francisco Shock, who are filling in for the Philadelphia Fusion. The 6 p.m. match will feature the Los Angeles Valiant taking on the San Francisco Shock as well. And to round out the evening, we'll see the Seoul Dynasty take on the Shanghai Dragons, a match that we highlighted in episode 5. Today I'm joined by Overwatch League caster Mitch Leslie and Overwatch caster and analyst Josh Sideshow Wilkinson. Let's talk about your preparation for Overwatch League preseason. What are you doing to prepare?
Right now we're preparing for our preseason Overwatch League matches, and we've been doing a heck of a lot for it, as you can probably imagine. A lot of meeting with coaches and trying to spend times with coaches and management staff. A lot of the players have been playing behind closed doors and preparing, and it's all pretty hush-hush right now. So we're trying to get some insights straight from the support and coaching staff of the teams and trying to gain what information we possibly can, while still trying to give them plenty of time to focus on dealing with preparing for these matches as well. A lot of these teams are still coming together. Some haven't had much practice time at all. On top of that, of course, we're working on the show. We're really hyped about what we're going to be bringing with the show in terms of content, how the desk is going to be set up, how we jump into the games. The arena looks fantastic, and the graphics and all that stuff is really, really fun. It's something very, very new, something we're really looking forward to producing. And obviously a lot of the talent are involved in how the show goes. So we've had a good chance to think about our segments and to think about how we present these teams and these players.
In your opinion, what should fans be looking out for in these matches this week?
What you want to be looking out for this week is definitely how these teams have come together. And take in mind as well that these teams have had a varying amount of time to prepare. Some have had weeks, some have had very little time. You're going to get to see all of these players. You're going to get to see all of these teams sort of bring out their players, subs and all that. So you get a chance to see everyone, which is going to be really exciting. I'm pretty sure these teams are going to be putting forward their full rosters to show. And what you want to be keeping an eye out for is perhaps those players that you don't know too well, or maybe they've been playing in a different region, or maybe players that have been playing in the North American and European regions that you just don't know much about. Because there's some really exciting talents that maybe people are sleeping on, pun intended, or not. and maybe don't know about?
Well, again, I think it's a process of answering questions. Florida Mayhem are pretty much a known quantity, I think, coming into this. The meta shifted slightly since last time. I think we'll see some very similar playstyles and things coming out from these 6 players, as we will throughout the season. This first game, I mean, it would have been a question of how Philadelphia Fusion were going to utilize their roster, but their roster are actually all in Europe. So they've just decided not to turn up for the preseason for whatever reason. That's nice of them, isn't it? But that gives us a better chance to have a look at San Francisco Shock. And really see what they're going to be doing for the first half of the season before Super and Sinatra can play. Because as far as I know, they're not able to play with the players that don't turn 18 yet in the preseason games. So that'll give us some idea of what they actually want to do before Super and Sinatra come into the team. And the big question mark for them is, who do they really have on the off-tank role when Super isn't there? Presumably Nomi will be playing tank for them, and then do they have perhaps Dante playing the diva in that situation? Is there something that we haven't quite seen from them yet? Obviously, this team was criticized for having a huge amount of hit scan players or tracer mains or whatever. You know, Baby Bay, Dante, Sinatra, IDD, QD. These 4 guys all fulfill very, very similar roles, or did do on previous teams. And it'll be interesting to see how San Francisco Shock have actually set these guys up and how they want it to go forwards. And I think that's going to be a trend as we see throughout the preseason. It's not going to be a question of where are these teams at in terms of their skill, I don't think, because a lot of these rosters are quite new and have to take time to figure out the teamwork aspects, and have, in some cases, only just brought people over to the US, or, again, in Philadelphia Fusion's case, have not brought people over to the US and are presumably swimming across the Atlantic or something. So I don't think it's going to really be a measure of where the teams are at in terms of their skill. It's going to be a measure of how the coaches want to use these rosters. And that's something new to Overwatch, because we really haven't seen massive 10, 12-man rosters be utilized on other teams yet. And so it brings in another dynamic of who do they want to field, how are these people, where seemingly their roles overlap, how are the coaching staff actually utilizing them? And for San Francisco Shock, that question's definitely going to be answered, I think, at least for the beginning half of the season before they have Super and Sinatra. But it also applies to Los Angeles Valiant, who they're going to be playing in the second game as well, because they've brought in the rogue players of Soon and Unko. Presumably they're going to be filling in duties on the Tracer and Flex support, respectively. And I believe they don't have agilities for the first half of the season, so perhaps we'll see Silk Thread come in, or maybe Grim if they want to play Soldier Tracer. So that'll be interesting to see how this team wants to move forward, and really whether they've shaken off the problems that they were having throughout the whole of Contenders Season 1 under Immortals, because they had a shocking fall from grace in the same way that Rogue did, and really every part of this roster, other than Silk Thread, had a terrible run of form coming into the Overwatch League, or at least not terrible, obviously, compared to the average player or even the average pro, but it was terrible compared to where they were expecting to be at the very top of the North American scene. Finally, of course, the day ends with Seoul Dynasty and Shanghai Dragons. And Seoul Dynasty are another kind of known quantity. We've seen them play at the Seoul Cup with a few of these guys as well, with Munchkin and Fletter and Zephyr as well. So this is more going to be a test of Shanghai Dragons and whether or not Miraculous Youngster really should have been the Chinese team coming in. Because there's a lot of unknowns about this roster, and what is known is that a lot of the individual pieces didn't have the greatest performances in terms of results, at least, on their former rosters. So, you know, can Roshan stand up against Miro? Is Five King that good on Lucio and was just in a team that was underperforming? Where's the Genji play going to come from? These kind of questions should begin to be answered, as long as it isn't just a complete roll for Seoul Dynasty. But that's what I would be keeping an eye on for each of our respective matches.
Sideshow, in your opinion, how important are these results going to be moving forward?
Like I said, I don't think the results will be that meaningful in terms of being predictive of final placements in the Overwatch League. They might well be predictive of how the teams are going to start out at the beginning of the Overwatch League, or perhaps even for the first half. But in general, I think this is going to be more about what kind of style are these teams looking for? what is the ethos of the coaching staff behind them in terms of how they're trying to utilize different players and where they're putting people in terms of specialization of roles. And it'll give us an insight into how brand new teams are developing. Like, where's the teamwork like on San Francisco Shock? What are the Shanghai Dragons up to? And are their players worthy of representing China? Who are some of the storylines? I mean, the LA Gladiators as well just kind of slammed together a Finnish support line and the Kungana tank duo, and then two kind of solitary, I would say, DPS players. Where's their teamwork going to be? How are they going to be able to perform? Now, some of these questions are not going to be answered as well, because I think the results this week, especially on the second day, are going to be... if I had to predict them, judging by what we know so far, they look pretty unbalanced. I mean, as we go over to the next day, we've got the Gladiators takes on Spitfire. Spitfire, coming into the Overwatch League, were the best team in the world, at least with the 6-man of GC Busan. And then they have Kongdu Panthera as well. Will also be interesting to see how that roster gets blended. Then you've got Dallas Fuel against Houston Outlaws. I mean, that should really be Dallas Fuel establishing themselves as a top contender going in. And then you've got New York Excelsior, who we haven't seen play in a while, but were an incredible team under Luxury Watch Blue, and have only got better with the addition of Mano and Jonak. Although they don't have Flower, but they should be able to mitigate that. And they're playing against the Boston Uprising. So really, any game on the second day, it would be great for the underdog in those situations if they're able to make it close. So I don't think the results will be able to read that much into them unless we have some real major upsets. And as I say, I think it's got more to do with how the coaches want to utilize the players.
Uber, what do you think?
The results of this week going forward do need to be taken with a pinch of salt. Think of it more in a show match context. Yes, these teams are taking it seriously. Yes, they've been preparing. But there's also a fair gap between our preseason and the actual main season itself. The stakes are going to be so much higher when we get into the Overwatch League. But fear not. I think there's a heck of a lot to take away from these matches. They'll be setting the stage. That's what the results of these matches will do. It's going to give us our first look at some of these teams with their varying amounts of practice, and also a chance for some people to maybe revise their rankings for some of these teams. A lot of people have a very specific idea of how they think a team will perform, but this is actually when we get to see the fruits of the labor of these coaches and these players coming together. Some teams with young and up-and-coming talents, some teams with already proven talents, and some rosters with a complete mix of the two. So there's a lot to be read into there, and we want to be looking out for those individuals that maybe we haven't seen shine before.
Speaking of the players, are there any players that you think we should be keeping an eye out for the preseason?
Keep an eye out for guys like Silk Thread on Los Angeles Valiant. Keep an eye out for Baby Bay over on the San Francisco Shock. Munchkin is also going to be back playing as well. He's with Seoul, and if you remember, he was quite a hot prospect as a player. He played for Laser Kittens back in the day, and now he's going to be with that full Korean roster behind him. He's so talented as a young player. Those guys are definitely going to be guys to keep your eyes on as well, and don't be sleeping over on the Boston Uprising roster as well. It's got some fantastic players in the mix there. A lot of people rated them very lowly, didn't expect much from them at all, and maybe that's reasonable to a degree. But guys like Dream Casper, who we've seen in top teams, Striker, who we've not seen much from, Gamsu makes his return, Avast as well as back in the mix. Young players like Kellex and Mistakes, but also guys like Note and Snow being thrown in there. It's a really diverse team with some really promising young talent.
Oh, there are actually tons of players that people should be watching out for. I mean, let's go through the matches and I'll give you some players to watch. So at the beginning, I think certainly Logix is a guy to watch in the Florida Mayhem against San Francisco Shock game. He really has to perform, and at some point has to get over this hump, or at least this perceived hump of the community thinking that he's choking at LAN. Certainly when they played in Contenders, the Contenders finals, he underperformed massively. Now, how much of that was down to his performance and how much of it was down to other teams focusing him and his team not being able to adapt is absolutely up for debate. But at the end of the day, they have to be getting more out of Logix because he is one of their star players, if not their absolute star player. even though he's playing alongside some other phenomenal people. So he's definitely a man to watch. How do they utilize Logix, and can San Francisco Shock try and shut him down in any way similar to how he was shut down against Giganti and Cloud9 at the Contenders playoffs? Over on San Francisco Shock, I think I would just be most interested in seeing how the teamwork works. I'm not really going to be looking for individual players. Again, with Los Angeles Valiant, I think it's more just like, who do they actually field rather than keeping your eye on anybody? Whether they field Unko or Kariv is a very interesting question. Whether they put in Silk Thread on a kind of projectile or flex DPS kind of role, he would be a very interesting guy to look out for, as well as Grim Reality in whatever new role that he's crafted for himself. But no real key player to watch in that matchup. And then the Seoul Dynasty against Shanghai Dragons match. I mean, man, everybody on Shanghai Dragons, you need to be looking out for all of these guys to see where their performance is at. Five King comes from a team that's just been languishing in the Chinese scene, but has always been lauded as an incredibly good Lucio. Roshan was a community favorite for being one of the best tanks in the Chinese scene way back in 2016, back at APAC. Can he live up to what was the hype, and see if he can go head to head with the tanks? Will MG be able to put up a decent performance there as well on such a pivotal off-tank role? A lot of questions surrounding this team, and who's going to be picking up the Genji. So basically everybody is a player to watch in that situation. And if you just want to be dazzled, then go ahead and watch Munchkin, I guess. Munchkin and Fletter are going to be your guys to watch over on Seoul Dynasty if you just want to watch a frag movie. And then over in the next day, London Spitfire, again, it's a question of who do they actually field? How do they combine this 12-man roster that they've got and actually output 6 onto the field? Do they end up messing with the team synergy of GC Busan? Do they end up fielding guys like Badosin, who's so excellent? Birdring and Rascal, who is such a phenomenal duo. Fisher, does he get time over Gesture? These are really important questions, I think, for London Spitfire's performance moving forwards and their coach's philosophy. And on LA Gladiators, it's not so much a similar story as who they're going to field, but it's definitely still a question of teamwork. And the guys that I would be looking for there is, can Bishu and iRemix stand up to the pressure of London Spitfire? We know that Surefour is really good. Hydration's going to be kind of supportive alongside him, I imagine. Or Asher, if it ends up being Asher. The Finnish support duo, also amazing. But what do the tanks do, and how does their synergy line up? That's a big question mark. In the next game, Dallas Fuel against Houston Outlaws, I'm going to be looking at the DPS players for Houston Outlaws, because the big question mark for them was, if you input good DPS players into the former FNR team, can they be a really sick team? And we're going to find out. We're going to be able to tell. It's not going to be Mandokusai because he's at home. So is it Jake and Linksa perhaps? Or Clockwork and Linksa? We'll see. And are they actually able to perform when they're put in that situation? And then for New York Excelsior against Boston Uprising, I mean, there are some really good players to highlight here. As much as Boston Uprisings gets trash-talked for being a poor roster, they can actually output 6 players who are reasonably good. Still shouldn't really be able to compete with New York Excelsior, but they might have a shot at doing fairly well for themselves. Striker's a really excellent tracer. Mistakes can be very good on a huge range of heroes. And Kalios as well, very, very good player. Neko, pretty good. But against New York Excelsior, we're going to get to see how they operate without Flower. Is Pine in a DPS position? Do they field Mano? He's been so incredible. So it's going to be a return to the big stage for them. So there's a lot of players to look out for. I'm not sure you're going to be able to have all of your attention. How many eyeballs have you got? That's the question.
All right, last question then. Which match are you both looking forward to the most for this inaugural preseason?
The match I'm most looking forward to in this preseason is going to be the Dallas Fuel versus the Houston Outlaws. Not only, of course, is it a Texas face-off, which will gain more meaning, I feel, as the seasons go, but it's going to be, of course, that Envy core with some huge players being added in. Players like Custer, players like XQC, Seagull, even in the roster. And then, of course, the Houston Outlaws with that core of FNRGFE, if you followed them over at Overwatch Contenders, mixed in with some fantastic players. Lynx is going to be in there. Mendokusai also going to be in that roster. Jake coming in, if you remember him from LG Evil. It's going to be exciting because both these two teams have high expectations on their shoulders. They've got huge brands behind them and very big fan bases. There's no shortage of star power in that particular matchup at all.
I think the preseason game that I'm most looking forward to is Seoul against Shanghai Dragons. And that's because it's pretty much the only one in which I think it's two of the top 5 teams battling against each other. And that comes with a large caveat, and that's if Shanghai Dragons actually perform at the top level of the Chinese scene. And we have little data to go on to be able to tell whether that's going to be a possibility. And what data we do have seems to be very shaky, or possibly even skew that negatively and make us believe that Shanghai Dragons would be a middling roster, or possibly lower if they're not able to get their teamwork together. But if they're able to perform at the level of an LGD on a really good day, Miraculous Youngster, another top Chinese team, 1-2-4-6 when they're playing out of their mind in some playoffs. The Chinese scene does have massive potential. You could make a roster out of Chinese players that would win the Overwatch League, or at least place top 3. You don't really know what's going to happen all the way through to August. But the big question mark here is whether or not they've been able to do that at all. And they're up against Seoul Dynasty, who are a lot of people, in fact probably most people's favourites to take the tournament. And now for me it's not. It's the London Spitfires, but that's a story for another day. But I think Seoul Dynasty against Shanghai Dragons should be a really interesting one, because if the Dragons are performing at a high level, then it should be a close, really good game. Maybe not that close, but it should be a very good game nonetheless. And if the Shanghai Dragons completely fall to pieces, then questions have got to be asked about their performance going forward throughout the season, and really whether they were the best that China had to offer.
And Uber, anything else you want to add before we kick this week off?
That's all for me for now, but do make sure you tune in Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We've got some great games to come, and hopefully we kick off the Overwatch League with a bang.
That's going to do it for episode 6. My thanks to Uber and Sideshow for joining us today, and make sure to follow them on Twitter at UberShouts and at Sideshow Gaming. And of course, make sure to tune in to the preseason throughout this weekend. Episode 7 will be back tomorrow, December 7th, where I'll be joined by Overwatch analyst and writer for JunkertownJournal.com, Pesto, as we break down key moments. Remember, you can find the show on any of your favorite podcast outlets, including iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Podcast. We're on YouTube as well. Click on the link in the show notes to find us. And if you want to stay in touch, email me at overwatchleaguedaily@gmail.com, tweet me at OWLDailyShow, or join our Discord at discord.me/OWLDailyShow. That's going to do it for episode 6. We'll see you tomorrow.